Alright, you're going to be listening to me talk for the next 20 minutes, so strap the fuck in and hang on. Here we go. So you're going to need to start by taking this little lower grill balance piece off. It is push pinned in from the side. You're going to need to take one 7mm bolt out of the fender liner, pull the little fender flare out, and then you'll be able to simply take the rest of the valance out of its push pins all the way to each side. Next, we're going to grab these push pins up here on the top. This is way too many of them. There's just way too many of them for this panel, but hey, Ford deemed that necessary, so there you go. Then we're going to get to this grill. You're going to have 4 10mm bolts up top and 2 8mm bolts down here below. Try to get a better shot for you with some better light here on the 8mm. We're going to go ahead and get those bolts as well as the grill air flap motor plug and what I believe to be the impact sensor plug, as well as go ahead and get that negative battery cable off the battery now. Then focusing around the headlight areas first, you're going to want to just go ahead and yank and pull, tug and wiggle this grill out of there. Next, we're going to go ahead and tackle the headlights. The headlights are going to have 2 10mm bolts up top, 1 8mm bolt down below, as well as 1 10mm bolt that is fastening it to this piece of plastic that kind of hangs underneath, and a second 10mm bolt kind of down on the side. I point to the wrong hole, but it goes in that upper hole. And then we'll just go ahead and pull those headlights out of there, easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Next thing we're going to want to focus on is the front bumper. There is some wiring here for the fog lights. That's just simple unplug, and then make sure you pry all the wiring clips that are attached to the frame rails. That bit of harness is going to come with the bumper. The bumper itself is going to be fastened with 6 21mm nuts. 2 are on the back side here that I'm trying to get a shot of. And the remaining 4 are on this front side, and they have these little kind of bolt keepers. They're kind of there so you can kind of bolt the bumper up and pull it up or down to make your panel gaps as good as you can. And we'll just go ahead and get that bumper out of there. Just unbolt and pull, baby. Obviously, when you're pulling the bumper off, take care of the wiring for the fog lights. You don't want that getting caught up on the frame rails and potentially getting ripped up there. Then we're going to go ahead and finish getting the battery out. Take your positive terminal off, and then there's an 8mm battery hold down. Next up is the battery tray itself. The tray is going to be a bunch of 13mm bolts, as well as one, I believe it was a T20 or T25 hex. Or Torx, excuse me. That one is just a little bolt in the back. Then while we're up here, go ahead and get this wiring for the AC pressure sensor out, as well as a plug down here for this secondary electrical water pump or bypass valve. I'm not sure what exactly it is. Then we're going to want to go ahead and take your intake tube out. If you've been with me before, you've seen me do this intake on this exact truck. So then we're going to want to remove the air box itself. That's going to be 1 13mm bolt on the side here. Alright, now that we're that far, we're going to go go ahead and start tackling this core support. Now, the AC condenser, radiator, and the radiator overflow and the radiator fans are all going to come out as one unit with the core support here. We're going to start with your radiator hoses. Your main radiator hoses, one is going to be your standard radiator hose clamp, the other is going to be this plastic quick connect push to fit, which are just honestly more simple in my opinion than the old school clamps, because fuck those metal clamps, to be real honest. Having drained it and unhooked everything, make sure your wiring for the fans is unhooked. There's 2 fans, 2 main plugs, as well as countless little push pins for this wiring harness section here. Up next is these AC lines. Now, I already have the system depressurized. We're going to go ahead and just pop those off. That's a 10 millimeter and a 13 millimeter nut for those. Now, before fully removing this core support, you're going to want to take special care to make sure the wiring is free and clear. And there is a little pro tip for you, I suppose. There's a little plastic air dam ducting stuff on the side here. If you pop one of those push pins out, you can get the wiring up and around that, and it makes it just easier to pull out, as well as it makes it easier getting that AC line in and out of there. And we'll just go ahead and tuck stuff away, make sure that's tidy, and get that out of there. Next, we're going to attack all these heater hoses. There is an absolute fuck ton of them, so we're just going to start driver's side to passenger side and remove every stinking one from the motor, just to get us all that extra clearance and there's not all that extra stuff on the front. When you get to this, I'm not sure if it's a bypass valve or what. There's 2 different things going on here. What I think is an electric pump, and then what I think is a bypass valve for the heater core. So when you get to that bypass valve, it is clipped in there into its little housing. So just use a little flathead screwdriver and you can poke that clip out. Once all your hoses are free from the valve cover, the heater hoses have a couple of clips on the valve cover. Just pop those off and you can stick all these heater hoses, all this stuff that's just constantly dripping fluid and water and coolant, and just go ahead and put all that on your wiring that you already put up in this corner, because water and coolant go really well with wiring, so just make sure that's all mixed up nice and tidy up there in the corner. Next, we're going to go ahead and get the drive belt off. This is pretty straightforward, as well as take the tensioner out so we can have better access to this alternator. Then we're going to start attacking the wiring harness itself, pulling it off the engine. I like to start at the oil pressure sensor and whatever fucking sensors above that one, I'm not quite sure. Get those tucked from underneath. Before we go ahead and get too carried away with the wiring though, we're going to grab all of these vent lines. So you got your crankcase ventilation lines from the valve covers, you have your booster line, you have your evap line, just all kinds of line, boys. I mean, you just got to pull those lines out, unplug them, pull them out. Just the less stuff on this engine, the better, obviously. We're also at this point gonna attack the intake manifold since we're here. Starting with unhooking again, if you've been with me, you've seen this done before, so you can skip this part. Just a couple of fuel line connections, your main inlet and your crossover to your mechanical high pressure pump. And then obviously in the back here, you're going to want to free up that wiring harness. There's a couple push pins attaching it to the intake manifold itself, as well as 3 plugs on the back of the intake manifold. They're a little bit tight, but doable. And then my tip is, once you get these 10 millimeter bolts out of the fuel rail and the 8 millimeter bolts out of the remaining 6 8 millimeter bolts out of the intake manifold itself, I like to kind of lift up on the intake manifold, pull it forward, and then get the remaining plug that's on the very bottom. Using a pick, it does have a safety lock on it. Yeah. Oh, also don't forget to try to mitigate as much fuel leak as you can here. I like to use little rags, but you can use whatever you want. I don't know why I'm mentioning that. That's pretty fucking stupid. Obviously, you don't want fuel going all over the place. I also like to use the little red caps to prevent more fuel from spilling all over the place. Now we're going to continue on with this wiring harness, obviously unplugging your direct injector harness there, the direct injector rail pressure sensor. You got a couple of things back here that you're going to want to unplug, as well as there's 2 more sensors behind the passenger side cylinder head. And once you're done that, you should be able to pull in its entirety. Oh, see, as I'm even talking about it, I forget about it. There is a 13mm bolt on the back side of the driver's cylinder head. It is a ground wire of some sort. The harness should be free at this point. You should be able to take from the driver's side to the passenger side. I like to just kind of wrap it up into a nice bundle and then hide it in the passenger side headlight cavity. Once we've done that, we're just going to make sure everything else is clear and free, and then we're going to get to these 2 top bell housing bolts. These are 13mm bolts. You should be able to get them with the wrench. I'm using a ratcheting wrench, but nothing too crazy. Almost forgot, at this point I do remove the crossover pipe for the direct injector rails just to gain access so I can hang my sling. So while we're still on the top side here, we're going to want to take the alternator out. Another straightforward deal here. I just happen to have a huge fucking issue getting it unplugged. Even though I literally just had the same alternator unplugged the day before. For some reason it didn't want to come out, so I had to use the pliers there, but get the alternator out of there, and then we can fish. There is, from underneath, there is one, I believe it was a 10mm nut holding this wiring bit. Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. There's another 10mm nut. There's 2 10mm nuts, one on the front and one from underneath. That's going to go ahead and free up these cooler lines for the transmission cooler, as well as the wiring harness itself that's running under the underside of the engine. And we're going to go ahead and get underneath, get our eyes on the starter motor here. Starter motor is 1 10mm and 1 13mm for those wires there. While we're on this side, I like to also pull that upper bell housing bolt, leaving the lower bell housing bolt for now. Kind of rinse and repeat on the other side. On the other side, you're going to have the drive shaft, front drive shaft, obviously, if it's 4-wheel drive. Up here in this corner is a plug. I got a terrible shot of it. You can't see it at all, but it is a rubber plug that is in the side of the block there. And it is your access to your torque converter nuts. There's going to be 4 of those. Exhaust nuts are all 15, except for I did have to throw a bolt in place of a stripped stud on the passenger side here, as you can see, but it's the same procedure, just unbolt and pull. We got 2 13mm shorter bolts that are just attaching this transmission, I guess it's your divider plate between your motor and your transmission. So we went ahead and, for the sake of video, just did all that stuff off camera because I didn't want to hang out underneath the truck with the camera. So we're back topside here. We are tied up. You do not have a ton of clearance between even this valley of the engine and the top of that firewall. So all set up here, we're going to go ahead and hook the motor up and put just a little bit of tension on it. With the motor slightly supported, we're going to go ahead and get the driver's side motor mount bolt out. This is a 24mm bolt, and we're going to go to the passenger side and get its motor mount bolt as well out of there. Once you got the motor mount bolts out, you can start to hoist up the engine a little bit higher. I am just now noticing myself that I forgot the transmission mount bolts. So go ahead and get back under the truck, get those two 21mm transmission mount nuts off, and that'll free the engine up to go even higher. You're going to want to go as high as you possibly can. As high as you can get it. Obviously, you don't want to go wrecking shit, making sure you're not pinching wires, blah, 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 you know. But get it as high as you can go, and then get a jack underneath the transmission bell housing. You can't, as far as I'm aware, support these on the pan. Last time I pulled a 10R80, it was with a special fixture that went through the trans mount and those two lower bell housing bolts. So given that I don't have that jig here at my house, I am supporting at the bell housing just with a jack. Or, sorry, a jack stand, rather. Now that the transmission is up as high as you can get it, we're going to go ahead and lower it down on that stand and make sure that that's all copacetic. Once that's checking out good, we're going to go ahead and grab our 13 and get those two remaining bell housing bolts out. I forgot to mention I leave a second one in, but both lower long bell housing bolts I leave till the very last here. As you can see, as I free up that driver's side bell housing bolt, the motor kind of tilts itself forward. That's coming free from the top side of the transmission, and all you're going to need at this point is a little tug and wiggle. Making sure obviously not to catch on anything, making sure you have all your wiring free and clear. Really just making sure, just keep double checking, keep making sure, especially if it's not your vehicle, you're not going to want to have to pay for anything extra here. So that said, the motor comes out pretty nice this way. There's no need to pull this cab off, especially if you're doing it at home. You can definitely take these engines out the top. Alright, take it easy.